So, how to cheat at chords? No, chords. Okay, so this video is really for anyone who plays music from lead sheets. That is a piece of music which just has the melody line on it and a chord accompaniment. You have to make up your own accompaniments from the chords. Now, when I was just learning, I bought a lot of busker books. I'm assuming they still produce them, I haven't checked. These were small format books containing 100 or 101 songs, generally of a particular type, a particular genre, or from a particular era, and they consisted of a lead line with chord symbols. Now, I was fairly good at reading the treble clef, so I could play the melodies fairly well, but my chord knowledge was just coming up to speed. Now, this was the days before the internet, so the only way to get this information was through books and magazines. So I bought a book of chords, and it showed you how to form every chord in every key. So I would be playing these tunes, and if I came across a chord which I wasn't familiar with, I would look it up in the book. It would show me how to form it, and I hopefully learned to memorize these chords. So I basically learned parrot fashion. Now, at the same time, I was learning how chords are formed, and it really is useful for all sorts of reasons if you know the theory behind chord construction, because it then helps you play notes and make up tunes and improvise in certain keys and with certain chords. Not going into that here. So if this sounds a little bit like you, if you like playing tunes from lead sheets but are stuck a little bit on the chords, this is my first tip. If you like, this is a real cheat. Hands up, major confession. Yes, this is a cheat. If you come across a chord which is a little bit more complicated than the ones you are used to, typically extended chords such as ninths and 11ths and 13ths and flattened fifths and all this sort of stuff, then my cheat, if you like, is just to ignore all the hard bits and play the major part of the chord. Now, I can hear some purists chanting at the screen already. It's not ideal. I'm not offering this as a solution to get you through your musical life, but if you want to play a piece of music and you come across a chord which you're not totally familiar with, then if you just play the basic part of the chord, in most cases it will sound okay. It won't sound out of place. Having said that, there are exceptions. This works with major chords and minor seventh chords and so on, but it doesn't really work with augmented chords, diminished chords, and I don't think it works with suspended chords either. But if you saw C minor 11, for example, then you could just play the C minor and it wouldn't sound too bad. Now, it's not uncommon in many cases for some of the notes in the extension, typically the highest one, to actually form part of the melody. So if you are playing an extended chord but omitting the extended bits, but you are playing a melody note, there's a good chance that that melody note will form part of the extended chord. So in practice you are possibly only missing one or maybe two notes, but hopefully the whole lot will sound okay, and your ears will tell you if it doesn't, and you need to investigate further. Now, this is again not to say that you shouldn't learn how to produce these chords, how to form these chords, but it is a cheat to get you through the piece. So the second tip is in fact a tip, it's not a cheat, and this does concern extended chords, and in particular the 11th chord. Now, I initially thought that the best way to demonstrate this would be to put my fingers on a piano keyboard and show you that way, but sometimes I have to say, and no disrespect to any YouTuber, sometimes I find that the fingers actually obscure some of the notes which they are trying to demonstrate. So I've come up with another solution. Now, whether you think this is a good solution or not, please let me know in the comments. So I have on screen here a super big keyboard, and I'm just going to point at notes to demonstrate what I'm talking about. So this is middle C, we'll say, this key here. So let's do an easy chord. Why make life difficult for ourselves? Let's say C 11th. So this would be formed by the chord of C, comprising of C, E and G, and then the dominant 7th or the minor 7th, the B flat, then the 9th note, which is the D, and the 11th note, which is the F. So all those notes, when played together, form the C 11th chord. Now, the astute among you, and I'm sure that's most of you, will have realised that the top 3 notes form the chord of B flat. So the B flat here, the D, and the F. So the shortcut way to producing an 11th chord is simply to play the root chord and then add the major chord 1 tone below it. In this case, we have the C at the bottom and the B flat above it, and there is your 11th chord. So sometimes I think that is an easier way to remember how to form an 11th chord than it is to think what is the 9th and the 11th notes of the scale. But that's a little tip which hopefully will help you if you're struggling with some of these chord extensions. Now, the third tip is something which you are probably aware of, but perhaps have not thought about it in any detail. Now, when I was learning my chords by rote, the chord book showed every single chord within a 1 octave range, and that range was from the F here past middle C to the E. Now, sometimes they did go up to the F here and down to the E down there, but basically all the chords were formed within a 1 octave range. Now, this, to me, certainly it had many advantages. First of all, if you are learning to form chords, shall we say, the proper way, then you know that chords are built on thirds. So let's stick with the C chord. So we have C, which is number 1, D's number 2, E's number 3. So we have C, E, F is number 4, G is number 5. So I think a lot of people, when they are learning chords, learn chords in the root position, and that's fine. You learn how to form chords and how to construct chords correctly. Now, I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube talking about chord inversions. Now, don't switch off. I know it's sometimes a bit technical. You think, oh, no, it's more chord theory, but just bear with me for a second. So it strikes me that many people don't think of forming a chord in any other way than in the root position. Now, I don't know how true that is, but let me tell you that my chord book, by forming every chord within a 1 octave range here, it had to use chord inversions. Now, I didn't know what chord inversions were at the time, and when I learned to play the C major chord, this is how I played it. I played the G here, then I played the C, and then I played the E. So technically, do we want to get technical? Okay, so this is technically C and its second inversion, but I didn't know that. This was just the C chord, and it consists of the notes in the C chord, so this was C. Now, there is a sonic difference between playing a C down here in its first position and playing an inversion, and our ears get a lot of pitch information, if you like, from the lowest note. So if you really want to hammer home the fact that this is a C chord, then you really need to have a C chord in the bass. Having said that, if you just played the chord in one of its inversions and played a tune on top of it, then it wouldn't clash. It would fit perfectly because you are playing the same notes wherever you play them on the keyboard. And if you get slightly more into chord construction or chord arranging, if you like, you could play a C down here, you could play the G here, you could play the E up there. It is still a C chord. You could play the C up here, the G here, and the E down there. It's still a C chord. Now, again, technically, if the chord is not played in the root position and the bass note is important, then you will get a slash chord. So in the case of my C chord, which had the G as the lowest note, G, C, E, it would be written C/G. Having said all that, and some people might think this is cheating, but that is the name of this video after all, I wouldn't worry too much about it. If you play the notes which are in the chord in whatever order, in whatever position, then it is going to sound like that chord in the vast majority of cases, and you would certainly be able to get through a piece of music by playing chords in that fashion rather than playing them all in root position. The other advantage of squeezing, if you like, every chord into this octave is that I didn't have to move my hand very far. I could just move my fingers around and I could play absolutely any chord within 1 octave. And this was so easy compared to forming a C chord, we'll say, down here, then moving to an A chord and starting it up here, or even an F chord. I could just play everything within 1 octave, and it was super easy compared to shuffling your hand around over a 1 or 2 octave range. Now, how useful this will be will depend on what sort of accompaniment you are playing. If you're playing a piano, I used to do 3 things when I was creating piano accompaniments. I used to vamp, I used to play arpeggios, and I used to play block chords. I could form these chords within this octave range. If you are just playing along, if you're playing on a piano or an organ or a synth or a keyboard, then this is quite easy to do, relatively speaking, compared with moving your hand all over the keyboard. So tip number 3 is to learn chord inversions. If you can play all the chords within a 1 octave range, it's going to make your life easier. It will also help when working out arrangements. So that's basically it. It was just a few tips to help you play lead lines with chord symbols if you were not completely au fait with some of the more extended and more complex chords, shall we say. And again, it's not an excuse not to learn how to form these chords, but it is just something to help you get through the process until you do learn the chords and know how to form them, and know when you can admit certain notes from them as well. That's another video entirely. Okay, so that's it. I hope you found this interesting and useful. Do let me know in the comments if you have any tips for playing chords, or let me know what you think of my tips. If you did find it useful, then perhaps you would like to consider subscribing to the channel, ringing the bell. Thank you, so you get informed of new videos as soon as I release them, and please do hit the big thumb or not, so I know if I'm on the right track with these videos. As always, I really do appreciate you taking your time to watch my videos, so for that, thank you very much indeed. I'm off to practice. I will see you in the next one.